So we see here that Amanda, she, as we mentioned, is an e-waste coordinator of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. But Ms. Cotton has been involved with toxicity reduction, pollution prevention, and production stewardship at the agency for more than 11 years, right? So she's been involved with this e-waste control and policy for a while. And today she will discuss recent legislative changes to the Minnesota Electronics Recycling Act. So Amanda, please.
Thank you. All right. Okay. Thanks for letting me have the opportunity to speak today on behalf of the Minnesota Electronics Recycling Program. And so today we're going to look at 2016 legislative changes and what we've seen since then. So just as background, the act was passed in 2007, and it had the goal to have manufacturers help pay for the end-of-life recycling of this electronics waste stream that was on the rise. And the hope was also then that manufacturers would, it would influence them to have greener design of their new devices as well. So today we're going to look at data kind of before the legislative changes, the changes themselves, compared to data afterwards, and then recent attempted legislation. So just as a background, what's covered, because every state's different, what's covered for households specifically in Minnesota. So we have a big umbrella, covered electronic devices. So we have computers, peripherals, what you see on that list there, and I'll also refer to covered electronics as CEDs probably throughout the presentation. And it also includes VDDs. And those are, to the middle column, they're video display devices. So TVs and computer monitors. So manufacturers who sell TV and computer monitors to households in Minnesota have to register and report. And then the 2016 amendments, they did affect a couple definitions. So VDDs no longer defined by screen size in Minnesota, and computer monitors no longer include laptop or tablet computers. So just the data before will include some of that weight and not after. So it turns out that Minnesotans are really good at recycling their 1970s wood console TVs out of their basements. And this showed up right away, made the news. The 2007, as I said, the legislation was passed. So in November 2007, Minnesota holds the largest U.S. e-waste event for Green Thursday. So you probably heard about our infamous Mall of America that we have. So there's a free e-waste drop-off at the mall. And over 1 million pounds were collected in just 3 days. 86 trucks. It was miles long. They had to turn people away. So we started out really strong. So getting right into data, fast forward some years before the changes, what did we started to see a gap going on, and I'm going to explain this here. So we have 36.2 million pounds recycled in the year before legislation passed. So a lot of pounds coming in to be recycled. So that's the green one right there. And then there's manufacturer obligation. So that is based upon the weight, at this time, 80% of the weight of what they sell into the state. So they're assigned this obligation that they have to take care of. But we're seeing this, in this case, 18.4 million pound gap between what their obligation and what comes in. So 18.4 million pounds, manufacturers are not financially obligated to take care of. And we see this gap that is increasing over time. We know we have the light weighting of devices, so if it's based upon the weight, that's where we see the obligation going down, but Minnesotans are really good at bringing their stuff in, the big, heavy stuff, so that recycling kept going up. So that's something we started to see. At the same time, we have counties, like HHWs, for example, local government. They're coming to us and they're stating that this e-waste stream is one of the most expensive streams that they're having to take care of. It's a lot of money they're spending on e-waste, and so we're asking for their data, trying to see what's going on. So this is a Metro County e-waste cost share before the changes. So this county has $1 million budget. How is this paid for? It has to be paid for somehow. But I want to make the point before I get into it that manufacturers, of course, pay recyclers for their obligation. So the recyclers have to charge collectors for recycling. So let's say a collector pays 15 cents per pound to a recycler. If this law, the statute wasn't in place, then it would be, obviously more than that to pay the true cost of recycling. So manufacturers, they're putting in money to help reduce what a county or whatever has to pay to a recycler. So keep that in mind. It's of course awesome what manufacturers are doing to help reduce that for all the pounds coming in for their obligation. Okay, keep that in mind. But this is, all right, when you pay 15 cents per pound, it's still, they have $1 million budget going on. How is that paid for? So you can see here for this metro, 64% is paid by the county. And we know that comes out of our taxes. They just don't see it as, it's on their taxes. Citizens at this time, they did not, there's no fee, end-of-life fee, so that's 0%. And then a manufacturer, this is a rebate. This is something kind of unique that happened in this county, that a manufacturer paid a recycler, and then it was able to trickle back down to the collector. So that's how that budget was covered that year. Non-metro e-waste costs, another one, smaller budget, $15,000 or so. No rebate there from the manufacturer. The county paid 33%, and they actually had a $5 fee device when you drop off a TV at that time. So that's how their budget was covered. So you have this gap going on, and it's 2016 legislative changes. What did we do to tackle that gap? Manufacturers, recyclers, collectors got together, multiple meetings to talk about how to handle this. What came to for the gap? We're going to set an obligation so it doesn't at least go any lower. So over 3 years, 25, 23, 21 million pounds. And then in the future, it's based upon VDDs collected for recycling. You could talk to me about that later, how that actually works. But basically, manufacturers still tell us their sales, and they each get a piece of the pie. So that's to try and help that gap. How about this cost share? What the counties are telling us what's being spent. So remember, all the parties got together and to talk about what to do about that, and it was agreed upon manufacturers will cover recycling and transportation for pounds purchased to meet their obligation. So manufacturers are supposed to cover those two costs for their obligated pounds. And then on the other side, recyclers can't charge a collector for transportation and recycling of CEDs that meet that obligation. So this is all dealing with the obligated pounds. I'm going to pause here, unless otherwise mutually agreed upon. So keep that in mind when I talk later. All right, that goes through. Now, what have we seen? The whole point of why I was asked to talk today, what have we seen since those changes? So on the left, this is what I showed you earlier. This is the metro county I talked about. And so we had that 18.4 million pound gap there. So then it comes the next year after the changes, and so obligation on the left, so it says 21, it was actually 25, was that first obligation, but I put 21 because that's how many pounds manufacturers actually paid recyclers for. They can also cover it by credits and fees, so, and you can talk to me more about that later, but this is what they actually paid recyclers for, 21 million pounds. And then there was a 26% drop in pounds recycled, that 28.7. So it could look like, hey, this gap is closer, and it is. But I do think you'll see coming up, we think that this wasn't because of the statute changes, just more of what's going on with the cost of recycling. I'll talk about why I think that drop happened. So we do see the gap closing up some. I'll talk about why here. So the gavel kind of shows the difference between the two years when the changes happened. So this is collected. So total for the state, almost 36 million pounds collected. Legislation passes, drops down to 31.1 collected, so there's a 5 million pound drop in the state. And we had to look into what's going on here, and we broke that out. Looked like most of it happened, as you can see, in the metro area. And so at the same time, and we have, not to pick on Best Buy, but they're our biggest collector in the state, and it just happened, they had a 7 million pound drop that year, and it's the same year that they started charging $25 per device. So it makes sense. And it's not only Best Buy that started charging. So did collectors, like that Metro County have been showing. They started charging $10 per device. And we looked, well, did they absorb all these pounds? But they didn't. So we do think that, you know, looking at Wisconsin household surveys and so on, what's actually in, we think that a lot of the TVs and computers are still sitting in people's homes being stored. Potentially. I think there is some drop, but naturally just getting out of the system, but we do think there's a lot being stored. And if you're wondering why is Best Buy 7 and their overall state is 5, it's because other collectors actually increased some. So overall the state dropped 5. And then we always like to look at what's the VDDs, the heavy stuff. What's the percent of that that's in this big umbrella of CED? What's this heavy stuff that we're dealing with? The percent of that, and it's always been 80% over the years has been the heavy stuff. So then we looked at the last year, and it's looking to be like about almost 74% are the heavy stuff. So it has dropped some, but still the majority of the weight coming in. All right, that cost share. So on the left is that I already showed you at the time when that Metro County, most of it was the county paying some of that rebate at the time. All right, now we go forward, legislation passes, these counties are waiting, yes, finally, some of the weight we won't have to maybe pay for if ours goes to a manufacturer. But what they're showing is that this same Metro County, 61% the county, no more rebate from the manufacturer, and the citizens, that's where they started charging the $10. So the citizens, when they drop it off at the HHW, they're paying $10. So that's how they're covering their $1 million budget. So they're coming to me and saying, I don't see a change happening. If my pounds are going to a manufacturer, I'm not getting anything for free. I'm still paying per pound. That in the same non-metro on the left earlier that charges $5, they're still charging $5. So it's the county and the citizens paying for their budget. So we had to try and do our best to look at, you have this cost, like let's break down what's going on. And we had a challenge getting exact data. What does a manufacturer pay a recycler? It was a challenge to get that data. What's the true cost of recycling? And that was also a challenge to get, but we were able to get, as you saw, what do counties, that's public information, what do counties pay recyclers per pounds? So I have limitations up here. So this is, we had to start with something to do the best we could, and this is data is from multiple sources, end years, limited sample size. So if, we welcome if anyone has better data on this to bring this. I want to make a point here, and that's what I hope you get out of this. So that yellow on the left, we looked at different data. What's the true cost of recycling? The median cost that we came up with was 30 cents. All right, how does that, got to get covered somehow. So we have the counties that I talked about. That one showed to be 19 cents per pound, and then manufacturers putting in 12 cents per pound. So you add the green and the red there, the counties and the manufacturers, and that comes to 31 cents. So you have those two coming into the recycler, and the cost at 31 cents with the cost being 30 cents. And then another way to look at it, a little simpler way to look at it, cost of recycling. So same numbers, just a different way to look at it. So you've got the different parties coming here. You have the counties talking about how much they're paying. It seems to look like they're paying more, and that they're not seeing the language that says the manufacturers are supposed to pay for the recycling and transportation. Not one has a contract that says 0. And I understand, like if a recycler were to say, hey manufacturer, you've got to pay 30 cents now, the manufacturer probably will go, I'll check with another recycler and see what they're going to charge me. And a recycler has these relationships and doesn't want to lose that. So Yeah, so the takeaway here is that the language, the other piece was I wanted to bring back to when I paused earlier. The recycler and collector says unless mutually agreed upon. So if a collector isn't getting a contract for zero, then they still need to get their weight moved. So they are agreeing to keep paying right now. So what did we do seeing this? Repeal the unless otherwise mutually agreed upon language, decrease regulatory confusion, allow for a recycling fee to be used if a manufacturer doesn't cover the full cost of recycling and transportation, and that did not pass this last spring. So what's next? Future meetings again with stakeholders. I want them to come to the table. Collectors talk to manufacturers, what I just said, let's say it face-to-face, for example, monitor data, and then we always communicate with other states on this. And I would love after this session or questions to talk to me about what you think about this. So it's not perfect, but we want to keep working on it. Thanks. Okay.